Hi there, I'm meteorologist Justin Storm, one of the few LRC certified meteorologists in the world. And I want to share with you what that LRC is and how it works and if it really does work. Was this major storm that's affecting Kansas and building across the eastern half of our country, bringing in a very nasty, significant amount of ice accumulation and spots upwards of 2 feet of snow, blizzard warnings in Kansas? Absolute nasty mess of a storm. Well, yes, it was foreseen to some degree back in November and forecasted in early December from Weather 2020. What comes next after that? I'm going to show you all these great examples on how the LRC works with a few examples I can hopefully break down into a very simplistic way of explaining it to you. Now, what is the LRC? What the LRC is the Lezak Recurring Cycle. It's a cycling methodology of forecasting long-range weather patterns and weather that affects us here day to day, including this major storm that's hitting Kansas on this Saturday, the 4th of January, and then across the country as we head into Sunday and Monday. Basically, a unique weather pattern sets up every single fall, and that unique weather pattern is a set number of days, and it will recycle, and it will continue to cycle throughout the year ahead until a new weather cycle sets up the following year. That's set up in October this year, and we have identified how long that pattern is, and we're working our way through the second cycle and soon approaching the third cycle of this year's LRC. Now, this storm came back around first in October, and I'm going to briefly diverge from this, but it has reemerged, and I'll show you an example of that here in just a second. But let's look at our weather pattern right now. This is our weather pattern at 500 millibars, or about 18,000 feet off the ground. These dips, or the U's, are our systems, our troughs, our weather systems that bring us our chances for precipitation. Much colder weather associated with them as well if you fall in the little U-shaped dome of them, more or less. And this is the upper level wave that's supporting the storm system that's hitting Kansas. And I can show you a few of those warnings out there. It's just a nasty storm, but this is the upper level wave. This dips down through the southwest and builds out of Colorado, and it forms this compact little 500 millibar low as it rips across the central portion of the country. Now, this eventually works its way off into the eastern half of our country as very cold polar vortex air builds to the north. It keeps this storm system pushed down to the south as it exits off into the Atlantic into Monday night. Now, what is behind that is a secondary trough that's building off in the southwest again as ridging takes place off the California coast and all the way up into the Pacific Northwest. This will drag very cold air down with it that's expected to breach into the Gulf Shore states. Now, here's our secondary system, and it builds down into Mexico, and eventually it rides across the southern half of the state, bringing in much colder temperatures in this area. Another system that's going to track across the country, and what is behind this? Not a second, but a third system that will build off of the west coast and dig down and eventually work its way across the country, but a bit further as all that cold air as the polar vortex pushes it all down to the south. We'll see all that cold air getting wrapped in this massive trough on the eastern half of the coast by the middle of January. Now, all of this was foreseen with the LRC. What is happening as we start and head into the middle of January has already happened. It happened back in November, and we've identified that cycle length, and I'll show you here. This is a little bit different of a map, and I'll try and zoom in, move it a little bit, and see if I can get it to look fairly close to what. Now, this isn't going to work the greatest, but you should be able to get a very good idea. Here is our upper level trough digging down through Colorado, and this is the same portion of the pattern that we just looked at in our current computer models on what it's forecasting for the next 2 weeks. Now, let's look at these 2 weeks that happened back in November. Here that storm system is. It rode through the central portion of the country, very similar path right now, but the polar vortex was not bearing down on North America. So this system actually rode up into the Great Lakes as that polar vortex didn't keep it pushed down to the south as we had just taken a look at. What follows behind this system? A secondary trough that will build off the west coast, dig down towards Mexico. That's exactly what we saw. There it is right there. There's our secondary trough, and we'll see a third one digging all the way down towards Mexico as well and riding across the country. Now, what happened after this? If we remember in our model, we should see a big trough over the southeast, bringing in cold weather across the eastern half of the country. There it is right there. Let's go back and look at that computer model again and see if we can see those similarities on what had already happened. Let's look at it really closely again. There's our storm system. I think we just passed it. There it is. There's our storm system as it rips through Kansas and builds into the Great Lakes. Our secondary system and our third system, followed by that large trough that brings in cold air across the eastern half of our country. Let's go back to our computer model and see if that's exactly what played out. There's going to be a lot of similarities here. There it is, building across Kansas. Polar vortex keeping that storm pushed down to the south as it is a influence on the LRC. So that goes. There's our second system right there. We'll see a third one building behind it. There's the third one digging down. And then we'll see right after that, boom. There it is. That is our exact LRC pattern that had just happened in November, happening now in January. Ultimately, we'll have to wait and see how precisely or exactly what ultimately happens in reality, but the model forecasting the exact same weather pattern that had already happened. If you have more questions on the LRC, you want to see more examples, you can get in contact with me. Drop me a comment down on Facebook or down here in YouTube comments, or you can shoot me an email. You can find that on my Facebook page if you're a follower. It's just meteorologist Justin Storm. You can find me over there, and we'll continue to bring you more updates. So what are we expecting to happen over the next few days? We'll see 2 more systems pass through the south, followed by that cold air that's going to dump down into portions of the East Coast. And that's exactly what we're going to see as polar vortex air brings in teens and 20s below zero to the north. That keeps that storm system well off to the south. We'll see our couple of little systems pass through, and then what's behind that? What is it but 20s and teens and 30s all the way down into portions of Florida. Have you ever seen temperatures drop down to the mid-20s in Florida? I've seen it happen a couple of times in some recent years where we've had to worry about frost potential down here, but if that happens all the way down across the Gulf Coast, that will be a very, very cold January for those folks, as they are not used to that kind of weather. But again, any questions, drop them down there in the comments. Get in contact with me if you want to find out how you can get this information. This information is for sale for enterprise businesses. We can help you out. Again, just get in contact with me and I'll help share that information.